at Mr. Speaker. But I can see it's still rearing its ugly head, which every county, and you know the sad thing, Mr. Speaker, this medical equipment supplies, it is detected at the source. So by the time the money is allocated to counties, it is already detected at the source. It is not even given to the counties, and that is why you see every county under conditional grant raising of medical equipment is 110,638,298. Mr. Speaker, we made so many reports, even before the Health Committee, before the ad hoc committee, before the Joint Committee of Health and the Committee on Justice, Legal Affairs and Human Rights. We discussed this issue, that this is a ripoff. In fact, there are many reports, Mr. Speaker, that even the governors and other agencies have declared county medical equipment supplies scheme as an outright ripoff. Because we are, Mr. Speaker, you know, when you read that report, and it is sad that I have to say this, in that report we were leasing gloves. How can you lease gloves? We were leasing bed sheets. We were leasing syringes. We need to be serious, and I expected the committee led by Senator Roba to write a caveat on these medical equipment supplies. Because how do you lease a syringe? How do you lease an apron? You know, these are things, Mr. Speaker, that, and in fact, the companies that were given to supply these medical equipment, we know them. Some of them have been blacklisted in the world, Mr. Speaker. Like one from, there is a one from America, other local companies, and many others, Mr. Speaker. So we need the Committee of Finance and Budget. This Senate has taken a position that medical equipment supplies was an outright ripoff. Who are these people, Mr. Speaker? Before allocating money to Meru, they must cut at Treasury. Who are they? Who gives them power? It is not even in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. So we must, these cartels, they must be called out as they are, Mr. Speaker. And you know, senators here are sitting pretty. Yet, Mr. Speaker, we should be vigilant. We should be, in fact, the Senate should push that we immediately stop and cancel the early medical leasing agreement. Because you have heard Senator Sifuna has talked about that there is one equipment that is used to check on the issue of leukemia or is anemic. Mr. Speaker, if you had given, you know, counties, when you look at the total that have been paid over the years, there was a time they were paying billions and billions of shillings. If you give 110 million or 200 million per year for counties to purchase dialysis machine, cancer machine, any other hemogram machine that checks on the blood count, Mr. Speaker, it would have been more cheaper than leasing it, Mr. Speaker. So it is very expensive. And mind you, national government is micromanaging health, yet under fourth schedule, health is a devolved function. So in other words, there is a problem that we need to really address, Mr. Speaker, and I think, and I hope the Chair of Finance and Budget should look at my Solomonic submission, Mr. Speaker, and ensure that we don't travel in that direction, Mr. Speaker, because this is a very serious issue. We are aiding and abetting corruption. If this thing will be investigated, Mr. Speaker, they will be shocked. When somebody will walk through this door, they will be surprised. Senate sat, say this is a public ripoff. But they went ahead and approved for finances to medical equipment scheme, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another point that I wanted to make is on the accountability aspect. I've talked about Mr. Speaker, that the accountability governor should be aware that it is not optional, Mr. Speaker, to be accountable, Mr. Speaker. I hope when the money goes, Mr. Speaker, these conditional grants, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of equalization fund, I know you served in the National Assembly, and we really grapple on this issue of equalization fund. Who qualifies? How do we use it? What is the criteria? How is it compounded? We did have a discussion between the National Assembly and the Senate, Mr. Speaker, and we did agree that marginalization does not happen only in Northeastern. Even Nairobi here, you can have marginalization. Even in Meru, even in Nandi, even in anywhere, Mr. Speaker, marginalization can happen. And when a report was being tabled here, during the fight, Mr. Speaker, on the revenue formula, and I've had my brother, as alluded to, and those days, I was leading one man, one vote, 1 shilling. Because I believe money should go to where the people are. The more the people, the more the money. But at the end of the day, of course, we fought through, we end up as a Senate come up with a win-win situation. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, at that time, a report was being tabled by Kenya Bureau of Statistics and said poverty is not in Northeastern or in Mandera. Poverty is domiciled in Busia, in Kakamega, and many other parts of Kenya, where traditionally we perceive that the marginalized areas are more poor. We realize the areas that are being perceived are more worse, like even including Migori, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, the issue of equalization fund in terms of marginalization in the concept of the constitutional provision must be relooked. And I'm happy that the equalization fund has tried to be, and even Nandi, I think Nandi has gotten, in terms of equalization fund, around 158 million. And those are a number of locations and sub-location levels that are within Tindred sub-county, Mr. Speaker. So this issue of equalization fund under Article 204, the rules and regulations must, Mr. Speaker, be relooked at so that equalization fund, and I want to ask the Finance and Budget Committee to also be futuristic, because marginalization keeps changing, Mr. Speaker, because it keeps changing. By the way, today with the housing program, and I want to confirm to the Senator of Nairobi, Senator Edwin Sifuna, that after some time we will change the face of Kibra with the housing program that the president has. After some time, the living standards of Kibra will change. What does it mean? It might move away from the marginalized, Mr. Speaker, and now become economically stable. Somewhere else within Nairobi might develop to something that might create marginalization, Mr. Speaker. So we need to relook on how we allocate equalization fund, Mr. Speaker, and go into the future looking at that. Mr. Speaker, on the fourth point and final one, because I wanted to finish on the equalization, on the issue of accountability, Mr. Speaker, we must relook at...
Senator Chelagay, the senator for Migori County, wants to inform you.
Do I really trust the information?
We want to inform you.
I thought he should be learning from me.
Do you want to be informed?
No, at this point, I don't want to be informed. Okay. Because I don't trust the way he's smiling sheepishly. He's smiling sheepishly, Mr. Speaker. And you know, as my junior, Mr. Speaker, he should be taking notes while I speak and learning from the best. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, on the issue of transparency and accountability, and I expected Senator Sifuna, because he serves with me in the Public Accounts Committee, that the issue of accountability is not negotiable. Of course, I'm extrapolating, Mr. Speaker. The issue, this money that we are giving out, part of the role or under Article 96 is oversight. This money must be accounted for from 1 shilling to millions of shillings that we allocate, Mr. Speaker. Governors must know that we are not allocating this money for free range or to play around with. They must account. And as a role of oversight that we play under Article 96, Mr. Speaker, the great governor of Migori, Ochilo Ayako, who was a senator here and was my chair in the CPIC, and now my brother, Senator Eddie Kisheru, must know that Governor Ochilo Ayako does not have a freelance to use the money that has been allocated to the great people of Migori. He must account for every shilling. If it comes from the Denmark, Danida, if it comes from Kenya Support Urban Program, that is allocated under World Bank in terms of Kenya infrastructural development programs, even it must be accounted for. Even we want to improve Narok Town, Mr. Speaker, where Senator Ledama comes from. If the World Bank allocates money on Kenya improvement, structural improvement program, we must account for Governor, the former governor, I almost say governor tonight, you have a new governor, Olentutu. He must account for it, Mr. Speaker. There is no option about accountability. And we must take this thing to every governor. Even my governor does not have anywhere to hide. This money that is allocated around 700 million to Nandi County, he must account. If you don't want to account for public money, why did you run for that office? And governors, Mr. Speaker, who might finish? I know I can see Meru, Mr. Speaker, the temperatures are coming down. The sugar levels in Meru was going through the roof. But I'm happy, I don't know whether you injected some drugs to cool the temperatures. But if, for example, Governor Kawira Mwangaza, he finishes 10 years or 1 term, she should be aware that she must be careful. Because Article 206 of Article 5 will catch up with that. There is what we call personal responsibility, Mr. Speaker. 226 as of Article 5. Thank you, Senator Ledama. 2265, Mr. Speaker. Even if you run away, I can see NMS, Mr. Speaker, General Mbadi thinks that he have assets and liabilities, he will never be culpable. Governor Kananu, former governors, Mr. Speaker, they must be aware that 226, Article 5, is knocking on their door. Governor Tunai, or any other former governor, and I'm not saying this in bad faith, I'm saying it in good faith that if you did not account for any money that was provided, if it is about Masai Mara collections, about the town council of Narok, where it came before our committee, you must account for that money, Mr. Speaker. Any governor across the region, whichever, if you come, even Governor Kidero, former governors that we have in this country, Mr. Speaker. So accountability, Mr. Speaker, is no longer an option. And I want, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, so that I cede ground to other colleagues, the EACC, when we summoned EACC, Mr. Speaker, I was sitting where you were sitting. EACC came, the report they tabled is they have only succeeded in convicting somebody who took 20,000 bribe. 20,000? 20,000. That is like $20. Is it $20 or $200? They had only convicted and succeeded in convicting somebody over a bribe of 20,000. But people who have looted in county governments are working scot-free. They are working to EACC the way they want. They are manipulated EACC. EACC do an ordinary morning raid. You tell them they have seized documents. After some time, it is written headlines. And you know our media are very good at giving very juicy headlines. They say they have arrested so-and-so, Governor so, with 200 million case. After some time, it fizzles out, Mr. Speaker. It is because EACC must tell us whether they are in bed with governors or not, whether they are fighting corruption or they are hiding corruption, because they can be hiding corruption, Mr. Speaker, or they are doing laundry. You know, also they can be doing what we call laundry, Mr. Speaker, and you know there is somebody in this country who has been doing laundry businesses. But we don't want to mention names, whether they are doing laundry. Because EACC has not, Mr. Speaker, EACC has not, and you know, we used to know that person who used to operate laundry services. But under Kenya Kwanza, that laundry services and washing machine will be closed down because we will not allow, Mr. Speaker, for any governor, including Governor Otichilo. If Governor Otichilo has made, has misappropriated funds, he must be taken to the court, Mr. Speaker. We cannot allow, Mr. Speaker, we cannot talk about laundry services. Mr. Speaker, Governor Otichilo, if he has misappropriated funds.
Senator Chalagay, there is another point of information. This
No,
time around, not
is it,
from your junior.
now for Gagalao, so
Is your age mate, not your junior.
Point of information. The Honorable Senator, who is my neighbor, I want to inform him that when you talk about laundry, you should talk about laundry by mentioning the people involved in laundry. We know even this administration is involved in laundry, clearing people who have court cases, trying to frame issues before the court. You should mention that instead of blaming people whom you can't even mention their names.
Chalagay.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that was point of
That is
information. That was a point of debate. And you know, Senator Otsosi is a senior ranking member of parliament. But Mr. Speaker, he knows his party leader has been running laundry services in Capitol Hill. We know. It is in the public domain, Mr. Speaker. And no one, in the issue of court cases, Mr. Speaker, because I know what he's alluding. You know, Senator Otsosi, through you, the Speaker, just give me 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, so that I conclude. Mr. Speaker, under the Constitution, the Director of Public Prosecution is not ordered by anybody. He knows. So if he comes here and says DPP has been ordered to withdraw cases, who can order DPP when the Constitution has given DPP power? DPP cannot be ordered, Mr. Speaker. So he's just being mischievous, he's out of order, and his statement should be treated with the contempt it deserves, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, look at the report of the Treasury. If it is not in good faith, Mr. Speaker, I might not agree with some of the amendments. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Samson, as you sit down, I didn't want to interrupt you, but you made some good points somewhere. That you are challenging this 5.2 billion conditional grant leasing of medical equipments. But I'm wondering if you are registered in this house and you are lamenting, and the people out there, the people you represent, are still wondering, and they brought you to this house and you're still wondering. So who is helping the other? You have the power to inquire and to do everything at your disposal, to know where this money is, because that is your work. So I think you try and do something. Senator Mungatana Danson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also make my contribution in this bill that is before us. Mr. Speaker, the county governments get their resources from three main revenue sources. There is their own generated revenue resource, there is the equitable share, which is a big revenue resource, and Mr. Speaker, there is this one that we are debating, which is the additional revenue allocation. So these are the three main resources or source of revenues for county government. Mr. Speaker, in this financial year, the current financial year, the amount of money that is allocated under the second source of revenue, this is the equitable share, is at 370 billion. Then, Mr. Speaker, the amount of money that we are passing in the third heading that I've said, which is the additional revenue source, has two headings. There is the amount of money that is given through the national government. That is, apart from the 370 billion, the national government can decide to give more, to allocate more under the additional allocation bill. And also, we have also loans and grants that come under this additional revenue allocations. So, Mr. Speaker, the question I am asking myself, the national government, under the heading of additional revenue allocation, has decided to make 5 headquarters. They have allocated 5 county headquarters, and they have also allocated money for leasing medical equipment, which a previous senator has referred to. Mr. Speaker, if this 370 billion has already been allocated as equitable share, and the national government has money, further money, to allocate as to build county headquarters, 5 as I have referred to, and also has money to allocate to counties to lease medical equipment, it means there is enough money, or there is more money that we can secure under the heading of equitable share. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution says that we are entitled at the very minimum for county government not to get less than 15% in terms of the equitable share. The point I'm trying to make, Mr. Speaker, at 370 billion, we are at 26%. But still, the national government has been able to find more money and additional allocation heading to give 5 headquarters, building for 5 counties, to also pay billions of money for medical equipment leasing. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make this point, that instead of giving the equitable share to remain at 26%, we pray that in this new administration of His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, county governments will see a huge leap from 26% to even 40, 50%. We are saying this because, Mr. Speaker, the government at the national level is saying take 370 billion. And then, under additional revenue, they are saying, oh, we shall lease for you medical equipment, every county, the ones that we are complaining about. They are also saying, we shall build for you county headquarters. Mr. Speaker, what is the logic of this? Why can't they give these second-level governments their own money to decide what they do? Mr. Speaker, I propose that those who are listening to this debate, that the Senate is saying, let us raise this amount from 26%. Let us not have 370 billion. This additional allocation bill is demonstrating, Mr. Speaker, that there is more money that the national government is remaining with, and they know it. Mr. Speaker, it is a big wrong and a terrible wrong, and the previous senator has said it, that the county governments are being forced into leasing medical equipment. They never participated in the tendering. They never knew who the suppliers were. And then they are being given money to pay back to the same people that the national government was negotiating with. It is an injustice, Mr. Speaker. It is wrong. And I want to say that it is a disrespect to the second level of government. We have said in this constitution, the people of Kenya want 2 levels of government. And these 2 levels of government must respect each other, Mr. Speaker. This Senate must put its foot down and say we cannot have contracts being decided at the national government for health functions. It does not make any sense. We may not need some of the equipment that we are being forced, for example, to lease in Tana River County Hospital in Hola. We may not need, and they may force us, because of this arrangement, to take those machines, and we don't have trained staff to run those machines. Those machines that are being taken to our county hospitals by force, Mr. Speaker, those machines that are being given to our county hospitals, leased, as we are saying here, by some companies which are of dubious character. Mr. Speaker, you will find if one little spanner breaks down, one little screw breaks down, we are not able to repair them. We don't have even contacts of suppliers. Suppliers don't respond. All they know is that there is money which is being given to the county government, and it is deducted at the source. So what we are doing here, it is just, playing around with our minds. People are reading here, under medical leasing services, we have received, I don't know how many, 100 and what million. And it is being deducted at the source. So people are playing with our minds. People are disrespecting counties, Mr. Speaker. This administration of the new president who has taken over, Mr. Speaker, I urge him and his new minister in charge of the treasury, Professor Ndungu, they should get away from the old habits of the previous administration. We must cut links with this kind of behavior where they are deciding for us what we should be leasing at the county level. Mr. Speaker, I hope they are listening, because we as defenders of the county governors and county governments, we are not happy being given equipment we cannot service, we cannot run, we have no personnel that we have trained to run those equipments, and then money is deducted. And here, it's being shown Tana River County has received, I don't know how many millions on behalf of the county of Tana River, which they never saw because it was deducted at source. Mr. Speaker, the new administration must actually devolve the functions properly, like we promised the people of Kenya. Let us respect county governments. Let us give them the money they require to deliver service to the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, as you look at this county county government additional allocation bill, Bill number 2 of 2022, you will see, Mr. Speaker, that there are various development partners. There is the EU, which is giving us conditional grants on devolution advice and support. There's the German Development Bank, which is giving us grants on drought as a conditional grant. The World Bank is giving us a grant on emergency locust response, and many other grants. Mr. Speaker, what has been happening is that since we have stayed in devolution for over 8 years, development partners have not been very committed to discussing matters directly with counties. And Mr. Speaker, this habit has developed because Treasury has encouraged it. There has been resistance from the national government to let go, and they have now reality that before I negotiate with Tana River County, I must go to the Treasury in Nairobi and speak to them. This mentality must change. We have developed county governments. We are living now in the third tier of the first devolution. Mr. Speaker, county governments are entities that must be given that respect. And our prayer from the Senate is that, Mr. Speaker, we can encourage the development partners, to develop the habit of confidently discussing with our county governments, give them their space. Why? Because the PFM Act, Mr. Speaker, Section 38, it covers county governments to discuss grants and loans with development partners. So we want this to be the way forward in future. Mr. Speaker, prior to 2021, this kind of bill, the County Government Additional Allocations Bill, was not there. This is because previously, the Division of Revenue Act and the County Allocation Revenue Act were also being used to feed in the county government's allocations. Mr. Speaker, the county governors, they went to court, and in petition number 252 of 2016, they got an order that the Division of Revenue Bill and the County Allocation Revenue Bill should simply deal with the two national governments at DORB, and at the CARB, they should deal with the Division of Revenue across the 47 counties, and nothing more. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we had this county government additional.
Mr. Speaker has left. Now you have Madam Speaker.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Oh,
Madam
sorry.
Speaker.
My apologies, Mr. Speaker. My apologies, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, this bill, we should support it because this is what the High Court has said. It has said that we cannot have the county government's additional allocations bill being debated and passed within the DORB or the CARB. So, Mr. Speaker, what we need to do is to pass this bill. And I agree with previous speakers that we need to pass this bill. Why? Because this bill, as small as it looks, Mr. Speaker, it is going to release or unlock 32 billion that is hanging somewhere inside. It's hanging in the air. People have committed to doing something for our county governments, but the money cannot reach them because it is not yet passed under this bill. Mr. Speaker, the difference between this, the recent county government additional allocations bill, this bill number 2, and the one that was previously there, the one for the financial year 2021-2022, is that the present bill has incorporated the equalization fund. And my learned colleagues who have spoken before me, they have referred to this equalization fund. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I need to say this, that we need to pass this bill, yes, because we need to unlock the 32 billion. But we must pass it, Madam Speaker, with amendments. Why? Because we cannot force feed this bill with the equalization bill. The equalization fund has its own management staff. Mr. Speaker, the structure of and the architecture of the equalization bill is totally different from how we are supposed to manage the county government additional allocations. So, Madam Speaker, it will be wrong for this Senate to go ahead and pass the equalization fund within here, because we cannot even operationalize it as it stands using this. We must find the correct instrument for us to pass, and which means, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the chair of this finance committee must go back again and come up with an instrument, which will be the equalization fund bill, so that we can debate it, and it must fit within the already established structure, the board and the management of the equalization fund. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I wanted to agree with this previous senator for Nairobi, the previous speaker, who said that the equalization fund, which is heading to its sunset, needs to have more years. Madam Speaker, when we passed the Constitution in 2014, we created in 2013, this new Constitution we are operating on, we created the equalization fund, but we gave it a sunset year. After 20 years, that equalization fund was going to die. Mr. Speaker, what we are saying now, it is time that we introduced a bill, and Article 204 provides for extension of the Constitution, provides for the extension of this equalization bill. Madam Speaker, I pray that this committee will go back and look at a possibility of bringing back another instrument for the equalization fund standing on its own, so that we don't have confusion. Yes, Chairman. And also, Madam Speaker, we are also praying that the committee will go back and look again at Article 204. And if we have not even operationalized it for the last 12 years, and we have only 8 years to go, Madam Speaker, it is time that they go back again and bring another extension. And I'm sure we will get the numbers. We get an extension so that we push it, like the Honorable Senator Sifuna said, even 30 years, so that we can experience the benefit of equalization. Why, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker? Because counties like Tana River, Madam Speaker, have been left behind. I have complained here before that previous administrations, previous government, even came up with papers, economic papers, justifying that we will continue to fund development in certain areas and ignore certain areas. Madam Speaker, more than 50 years after independence, you will find a number of tarmac roads that are passing through Tana River County. There are only those roads that are passing to connect between this and the other county. They are inter-county roads, Madam Speaker. You will not find tarmac, except just in the headquarters, which was done by the previous governor. Madam Speaker, we want this equalization fund to work. We want this equalization fund to be a reality. 50 years, more than 50 years after independence, we have been left behind, and it is by design of this government. Madam Speaker, when we see senators in this House arguing that there is marginalization in Nairobi, there is marginalization in big cities, so they are also entitled. Madam Speaker, I think this is a total misinterpretation of what equalization fund is meant to achieve. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, equalization fund is meant to bring up counties that were left by design, by administrations of past governments. Madam Speaker, I pray that
Okay, you are granted the 1 minute. Just proceed.
As Madam Speaker was saying, when the instrument on the utilization and application of equalization fund is brought to this House through a bill, I pray, Madam Speaker, that the real reasons shall be achieved, which was to help far-off counties that were left deliberately by government marginalization, will achieve some reasonable level of development. It will be very unfair and immoral and wrong for counties that already benefited from previous administrations to come and argue that they themselves are also marginalized and should be given a share of this equalization fund. Madam Speaker, I pray that when the committee brings this bill, we shall be fair to counties that were left behind. Otherwise, Madam Speaker, I pray that we pass this bill, but we pass it with amendments in mind which will make it not difficult to implement. We should have the Equalization Fund Act separate from this. So we should pass it, but pass it with amendment. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Could we have Senator Tobiko Pesi Paris?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this bill and congratulate the committee and the chairperson, Ali Roba, for the intensive work that they put in order to have this bill in place, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think it is long overdue that the issue of additional funds is given a legal framework that will then guide the counties and guide the allocation of this money and the utilization thereof, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill seeks to provide for additional allocations in the year 2022-2023. Madam Speaker, it also seeks to direct the proceeds of loans and grants as given by development partners, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill also seeks to facilitate the transfer of conditional and unconditional allocations, Madam Speaker, to counties from the consolidated fund to the county revenue funds and special purpose accounts, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill will also guide on the allocation of other funds as agreed upon by the Senate and the National Assembly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think this is long overdue and needs to be implemented. This House should pass this bill as soon as possible with the necessary amendments, Madam Speaker, and which I agree particularly with the Senator Mungatana on the issue of equalization fund, Madam Speaker. That it is good that the equalization fund is mentioned as a fund that should be implemented, and it's also long overdue, but should be given its own legal framework, Madam Speaker, so that it gets the necessary attention and gets directed to the right counties, Madam Speaker. Because it is interesting in our country, Madam Speaker, that whenever people see resources and or even opportunities, everybody wants to grab it, Madam Speaker. And yet, the law, the 2010 Constitution, had identified loopholes and omissions in our areas of development as a country, that there were areas that were left undeveloped, either by design, either by omission or whatever it was, either, because of political processes, maybe because of not having numbers, minorities are living in these neglected counties, Madam Speaker. And so, Madam Speaker, the Equalization Fund is important that it is treated on its own, Madam Speaker, so that it benefits the right counties, Madam Speaker. I'm particularly excited about this bill, Madam Speaker, that it also seeks to get funds for drought mitigation, Madam Speaker. Particularly at this time when our, like more than half of the counties are going through the effects of a crisis level of drought, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, our constituents, our people have been left paupers because of the drought, Madam Speaker. And there must be a way to mitigate the effects of this drought. There must be a way to now bring, climate smart agriculture, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is good that water and sanitation is going to be addressed, particularly in counties like Kajiado, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also see that in this bill, Madam Speaker, that we are still talking about county headquarters, almost 10 years after devolution, Madam Speaker. It is shocking, Madam Speaker, that there are counties that still don't have, places to operate from. We don't know whether they are operating from kiosks, whether they are operating from, their personal homes, Madam Speaker. It is unimaginable that we still don't have county headquarters in some counties in this country. And Madam Speaker, I also agree, and I see that the issue of leasing medical equipment is mentioned here. And I agree with the honorable senators who have spoken before me that the Kenya Kwanza government must be very intentional in delinking itself with the ills of the Jubilee government, Madam Speaker. We must have a fresh start as the Kenya Kwanza government. We must delink ourselves from the KEMSA cartels, the costs that are very well known to be associated with such equipments, just to milk resources from counties in the name of giving counties resources that they have never seen or they have never managed, Madam Speaker. I am sure our counties will be possibly better equipped if they were allowed to do their own procurements and have their own medical according to the needs of each county, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I support this bill, Madam Speaker, also so that it directs funds from development partners and that the Treasury is involved in facilitating such agreements between counties and the development partners.
Senator Wambua, what's your point of order?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker,
Senator Perry, cede the floor.
It is not my intention, Madam Speaker, to interrupt the floor by my friend, my colleague, Senator Paris. But, Madam Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 34.4a and 34.5, I beg to move that the Senate resolves to extend its sitting until the conclusion of business listed at number 8 in today's order paper, and upon receipt of the results of the Yala election from the National Assembly. Madam Speaker, I beg to move and I request Senator Roba to second.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to second the proposal in accordance with Standing Order number 34, as the issue in discussion is an extremely critical issue that needs to be exhaustively finished, as well as the agenda of the day earlier of Yala elections that need to be also exhaustively finished before we can close. And I second. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Members, there is a motion that has been moved to the House proposing that we extend the sitting of this House until the conclusion of Order number 8. I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 34.4a and 34.5, the Senate resolves to extend its sitting until the conclusion of business of Order number 8 in today's order paper, and upon receipt of the results of the EALA elections from the National Assembly. I now put the question that pursuant to the Standing Order 34.4a and 34.5, the Senate has resolved to extend its sitting until the conclusion of business of Order number 8 in today's paper, and upon receipt of the results of the East African Legislative Assembly elections from the National Assembly. As many as are of that opinion say aye. As many as are of contrary opinion say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you. So the sitting of this Senate is extended. Senator Paris, you can continue with your.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hope also that means an extension of my time. So, Madam Speaker, I was saying this bill is important and is addressing very crucial and pertinent issues that are affecting our counties right now. But, Madam Speaker, even as we emphasize on, regulating and giving a legal framework to, conditional grants, additional resources to the counties, and unconditional grants, monies, Madam Speaker, we must also, as a House, be able to insist that counties put into good use and be able to account on revenue allocations or on revenues, Madam Speaker. We must be able to insist on this, Madam Speaker, because counties have found a way of accounting possibly for what is needed to be accounted from the national government, from the shared revenue, Madam Speaker, but they have found a loophole in the resources, the revenues that they collect locally, Madam Speaker. And these are the monies that are getting wasted. These are the monies that, the good people of this country are not getting benefits from, yet they are coming directly from their pockets and from their businesses, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this House must also find a way to regulate such monies and to be able to make counties to account, and also to see where collections are not being done properly and where there are no such systems for accountability, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I support this bill, and I think we should go beyond this and be able to give another framework for the Equalization Fund, and that the Early Robber Committee should even go beyond this and see how we are going to give some formal, system of working and monitoring the own source revenue. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. I want to give Senator Muma Catherine an opportunity now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to rise and support the passing of this bill. Madam Speaker, it is good that we are now putting in place a framework to bring a little order in the matters of financing county functions in this country. Madam Speaker, since the onset of devolution, we have had a lot of confusion around the issue of functional assignment, the issue of national government supporting activities that fall within county government functions, the issue of development partners supporting activities that fall within the county government functions. And Madam Speaker, I happened to be in the CIC in the initial years, and in the first term of county governments, they suffered quite a lot as a number of development partners literally refused to fund their functions because they believed the county governments should not receive those funds, but that those funds must be channeled through the national government ministries. This bill will help to account for all funds that the people of Kenya will receive as grants, as loans, and as other are able to know exactly how much money has been deployed to counties towards the development of counties. Madam Speaker, even as I support the bill, I would like to support Senator Mungatana's proposal that we cannot mix the provisions of this additional funds and those of the Equalization Fund. Madam Speaker, the Equalization Fund is provided for under the Constitution. It was supposed to have been operationalized, but the Jubilee government completely refused to operationalize the Equalization Fund. And Madam Speaker, the issue of operationalizing funds under the Equalization Fund need a special discussion on how we can recoup the 10 years that have been lost out of the 20 years that the fund was supposed to exist. So if we sneak it into this bill, we will actually be undermining the very reason why we have the Equalization Fund. I suggest, Madam Speaker, that that committee specifically set time to relook at how we can operationalize the Equalization Fund to ensure that those funds actually are deployed towards what they were intended to be deployed for. So we should remove that provision within this act. Madam Speaker, I would also want to add one more provision that the committee should consider looking into. Within these additional funds, the Senate will have additional oversight mandate over these funds. I would want to request the committee to consider providing, even if it's just one clause, that will require county governments to submit their reports as part of the oversight towards ensuring that the Senate carries out its oversight mandate in respect of these funds. And we need, possibly in the PSC regulations, to also include further regulation that will ensure that that additional responsibility that the Senate gets is clearly reflected and clearly provided for in order for the Senate to be able to adequately carry out those functions. Madam Speaker, I'd like to remind members that during our induction, one of the issues that was raised was the need for the Senate to go beyond just looking at the figures in the Auditor General's report, but to try and come up with a mechanism that can enable us to also oversee through carrying out impact assessment activities that can enable us to appreciate and tell Kenyans how the funds that are being deployed to counties are impacting their lives or changing the lives of the people. Madam Speaker, with those few amendments that I've proposed, I beg to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We can have Senator Osotsi Godfrey.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to also make my comments on this bill. And from the onset, I support this bill, but like other members who have spoken before me, we will need to have some amendments on this bill, particularly on equalization fund, which I find to be very misplaced in this bill. It should not be in this bill at all. And I've also looked at the schedule proposed under equalization fund and noted that that proposal in itself is discriminatory in the sense that we have 34 counties which have been listed, and we have not been told which criteria was used to do that allocation, because I can see my county is not included, and yet all the other neighboring counties are included. Counties which have even more higher levels of, lower levels of poverty, like Kisumu. I can see Bungoma is there, Siaya, Nandi, Homa Bay, almost all the counties within the Lake region are included, but Vihiga County is not included. So I will support any amendment to remove this particular aspect from this bill. After all, it's misplaced and it is very discriminatory to other counties. To lump Vihiga among the rich counties, I think is very unfair, because I can tell you there are so many places in my county which are hardship areas. And I think the government needs to change the criteria of determining which areas are hardship and which areas are not hardship. Because clearly we see some areas are listed as being non-hardship when in fact there are areas which are having a lot of challenges with poverty, with infrastructure, like those other counties that have been given priority on this. But what is important, Madam Speaker, is that this bill is long overdue and is going to unlock 32 billion shillings to the counties. And I think the committee needs to move with speed so that we conclude this matter in this House, probably before we go for recess. We hope that the National Assembly is going to do the same, so that this money is released to these counties as soon as possible. This money is going into various aspects of our county development, including improvement in health, agriculture, rural inclusivity, climate change, water and sanitation, and I think it's an even informal settlement. So, Madam Speaker, counties have been waiting for this money, and I think we will do a service to this country if we will be able to pass this bill within the shortest time so that our counties are able to receive this money. I also want to concur with Senator Tobiko on the issue of county headquarters. I think it's very strange that some counties are still constructing headquarters. 10 years after devolution. Really, this is surprising, and I think something has to be, this matter has to be investigated further by the relevant committee of Senate to find out why this huge delay, and yet these counties have been receiving money. Madam Speaker, this bill also introduces very strong mechanism of accountability on all the monies that are taken to the county in form of grants, loans, and from development partners. And I hope that upon the passage of this bill, we will have strong mechanisms on the ground to ensure that every single coin that is sent to the counties in form of additional allocation is used for the purpose that is supposed to be used, and there is value addition to the citizen of this country. Madam Speaker, you are well aware that some of the counties have been misappropriating this money. And I think this bill, to a large extent, is going to help in enhancing transparency and accountability. In fact, this bill proposes some mechanism of reporting under Clause 9, where it talks about the reporting that is going to be done on matters of transfer on monthly basis. I think that will enhance information flow, and it will also help us as senators to be able to track the movement of monies to counties and be able to oversight very effectively. Madam Speaker, other colleagues have also talked about medical leasing. I think this is a very serious matter that we have allowed it to go on, and yet the counties are not getting maximum benefits from this medical leasing equipment program. I think it is a high time that this particular arrangement between the national government and the county government is stopped, so that our counties continue getting money for the right purposes, and then also removing the possible misuse of public funds in form of medical leasing equipment arrangement between the national government and the county government. Madam Speaker, I don't have additional information to give on this, but I want to emphasize that we would need to fast track the legislation on equalization fund so that we have a proper legal framework in place of determining even the counties which are supposed to benefit from this equalization fund, and also to comply with the constitutional requirement. And I hope this is going to be prioritized by the relevant committee in conjunction with the National Assembly, so that we have a proper legal framework on matters to do with equalization. For those few remarks, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Senator Veronica.
Madam Speaker, I rise to support the passing of this bill and to also congratulate the subcommittee that has made these efforts to ensure that there is a bill being debated which is not only useful to the House, but it's also important and very useful to all the counties, because the import and the impact of this bill, Madam Speaker, is to assign and allocate additional resources to the existing financial framework within the 47 counties. Indeed, Madam Speaker, this bill speaks into improved health care through the provision of funds for lease of medical equipment, and this will definitely be required and be very useful for all the counties across the whole country. Madam Speaker, let me state at this very early opportunity that the lease of this medical equipment, Madam Speaker, has been subject to certain conditions, such that it's been perceived as though even if the allocation and the assignment of this fund has been put in paper, the counties tend to feel that the deduction is done at source, so they lose the control of what kind of equipment they need to have at the counties. Madam Speaker, I believe this framework was set by the previous government, and there is room to improve the framework within which this medical equipment should now be leased to counties. The Kenya Kwanza Coalition campaigned on the platform of improved healthcare for all Kenyans. And the bill as presented today clearly shows there is an affirmation towards contributing and solidifying this promise to the Kenyans. Madam Speaker, we would call upon the county governments upon the passing of this bill, because I believe the House is committed on both sides to pass the bill, that discussions be had between the county and the national government on the best way to have the least equipment. And this bill, Madam Speaker, gives the framework and introduces a legal platform within which these negotiations can be done and discussed, so that counties are allowed to participate in the decisions that then bring the least equipment into their respective counties. Madam Speaker, the additional resources have also targeted the construction of county headquarters. And like many of senators have raised issues on counties that do not seem to have, or that do not have headquarters already constructed 10 years after they came into existence. Madam Speaker, I believe counties now have a challenge as they look at this new bill, the bill on county government's additional allocations number 2, Bill 2022, to find that there is need for every county to be able to be housed within a headquarter and to be able to have sufficient facility for their governors, for their speakers, so that, Madam Speaker, we can check on the expenditure that is being used in every county, and that there is an expenditure, the expenditure pattern of the counties is responsible and also has a lot of transparency and also makes commercial sense, Madam Speaker. It makes sense for every county to be headquartered within its own premises to avoid rental expenditures that may be extravagant or that may not make economic sense. Madam Speaker, I have noted that a county like Isiolo, Lamu, Nyandarua, Tana River County, Tharaka Nithi County are some of those counties that are targeted to have an allocation of resource towards the construction of their headquarters. We will encourage all the governors, Madam Speaker, even as this bill is being debated to be passed, that every county, it's a bare minimum, it's basic, that they should have headquarters 10 years, over 10 years, I believe it's the 11th going to 12th, over 10 years. Now the counties should have that as a bare minimum. In fact, Madam Speaker, as the national government rolls out the housing project into the counties, it will be good procedure that any county that is getting the advantage of that housing should as well show good faith by making sure that themselves are housed within a headquarter which has been constructed through the public resource, Madam Speaker. The additional resources, Madam Speaker, have also gone towards mitigating the effects of climate change. There is allocation of resources towards positive climate action, Madam Speaker. Once again, it propels good thinking towards how counties and how the people of Kenya can contribute towards a climate action that then restores the degradation that has caused us to be where we are in terms of the climate change as a global village. Madam Speaker, the resources assigned, Madam Speaker, then give an opportunity to counties to participate and fully engage in taking climate action and teaching the people and learning together with the citizens within the counties on how best they can mitigate climate change within the respective counties and customize to every county. Madam Speaker, one of the frameworks within this bill that then brings a breath of fresh air is a framework for the management of the donor fund that is going to the county. And I believe, Madam Speaker, any development partner who is listening to the proceedings in Senate today should have a big smile on their face that there is a framework now. Counties, Madam Speaker. So I rise to support the passing of this bill and to say to the committee that has presented this bill to the majority leader that they have set a good pace in the House, and this House can now have more bills that can be debated by the 13th Senate. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support the passing of this bill.
Thank you. Senator Seki.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this motion, this bill presented to us this afternoon by the Committee on Finance and Budget. I believe that it has come in the right time where we want to give more resources to the county governments through this allocation of county additional allocation bill 2022-2023. And I want to support by congratulating the committee led by Chair Ali Roba, the party leader on UDM. To be a supporter of this motion, I want to allude that most of the speakers have really supported that county governments need to introduce more transparency and accountability to such kind of monies that goes to counties. We know that on-source revenue from county governments have never been allocated well, has never been accounted well by county governors, administrations all over the country. Because one, they have been having issues of allocating in their budgets more money, such that also introduced much more issues like overspending, or even issues like things like, for example, over bills, more bills than they come without paying contractors. And I want to say that with this, we really need to request the Committee on Finance and Budget and other committees, relevant committees, to put some restrictions to county administrations so that as we do the revenue collections, revenues, they need to have quite good structures to prevent such kind of things. Two, we have now these additional conditional allocations, which now we have introduced today, that we need to approve as immediate, as soon as possible. And this is why. It is because additional revenue, as the additional allocation bill will help counties to unlock so many problems, particularly on issues of health, roads, and so many other things, as alluded by the bill. So to me, I think I want to introduce and say that I support this bill. I support this bill for us to immediately approve as soon as we can, because we know the county governments will benefit quite a lot. And as indicated by the previous presenters, we said that we indicated that the conditional grant need to have a separate structure so that county government will not just receive this money and then use it without a structure that can direct them, can bring them to account this kind of money. So I think, to me, I want to support this motion and congratulate the committee led by Ali Roba for bringing this motion this afternoon. Thank you so much.
It's a very important bill, the county government's additional bill of 2022. Madam Speaker, from the onset, I must declare that I am in support of the bill. But, Madam Speaker, even as I support this bill, I'm supporting it while at the same time proposing amendments to the bill. My colleagues have spoken very, very well on this bill, and so I do not need to repeat what has been said. I will only want to emphasize three things. One, Madam Speaker, in my very considered opinion, my brother, the senator from Mandera, who is the chair of this important committee, he should consider deleting clause 6 and deleting the third schedule from this bill. So that, Madam Speaker, we are left with clarity on what it is that we need to do. Madam Speaker, my last experience with this kind of bill is that in the year 2019 and 2020, when there were issues of COVID and locusts, and donors came calling, and development partners came calling, there was a serious conflict between county governments and the national government on the utilization of funds, especially for mitigation on the COVID and the locust front. Some of these conflicts, Madam Speaker, arise when innocently houses of parliament pass bills that are clouded, and therefore giving room for interpretation in different ways. There is sufficient clarity in the Constitution on Article 204 in relation to the Equalization Fund. Clause 1 is very specific on even the amount of money that the Equalization Fund should have, the kitty should have. Clause 2 is clear on the areas where that money should be invested, in water, in roads, in health, in electricity. And the whole idea behind the Equalization Fund, Madam Speaker, is to raise the living standards of residents in marginalized areas and bring them to a level that is almost at par with other areas that are comparatively more privileged. Madam Speaker, and this is important for senators to hear and for the National Assembly to hear, when it comes to the appropriation for the use of the funds in the equalization kitty, Madam Speaker, appropriation, according to the Constitution, is a shared function between the National Assembly and the Senate. So that, Madam Speaker, it doesn't get to that point, if it will, that because this fund is going to be utilized by the national government, then an argument is brought here that the National Assembly has exclusive right to appropriate on this fund because the national government that is implementing. Madam Speaker, the Constitution in Clause 3 of Article 204 states very clearly that appropriation will be done by Parliament. And when there is reference to Parliament in the Constitution, it is the National Assembly and the Senate. Madam Speaker, it has been said, and I am in full support, that we need to move with speed. And I actually want to challenge my brother, the chair of Finance and Budget, to move with speed and bring a legislation to actualize this equalization fund separately from additional allocations to counties. Madam Speaker, when that happens, if it will happen, this Senate needs to agree on the distribution of that fund. Initially, when I joined the Senate, Madam Speaker, in 2013, there were only 14 counties that were supposed to benefit from the equalization fund. Unfortunately, by that time, Kitui was not poor enough, marginalized enough to make the list. So we had intense conversations with CRA, we pushed, and they pulled, and now we have a list of 34 counties. What has happened, Madam Speaker, is that now CRA has decided that in these counties that have been listed as marginalized and deserving of the equalization fund, they will pick and choose villages within those counties that should benefit. When that time comes, Madam Speaker, if Senator Governor Roba will bring that bill before this House, we will need to relook at those villages that have been picked by CRA to benefit from the equalization fund. In my own county, Madam Speaker, and this is important, I have villages and wards that are seriously marginalized. That even those villages that are naturally marginalized, call them marginalized. That's the extent of marginalization in those villages. But they have not been picked as villages that should benefit from this fund. I have a lot of those villages, especially in the Raka ward of Mwingi North constituency. Madam Speaker, that's a conversation we need to have, and that is why I'm proposing that we completely delete clause 6 from this bill and have a separate conversation about the equalization fund. The second issue that I want to speak to, Madam Speaker, is the first schedule. Madam Speaker, when you look at the first schedule, and it is talking about counties that are still in column B that are supposed to be allocated funds for the construction of county headquarters. My take, Madam Speaker, and because we should not, in this House, Madam Speaker, we must be truthful to ourselves and truthful to this country. Madam Speaker, for me, that column B of the first schedule, the only thing that it does for me is that is an automatic invitation of the Senate Counties Public Accounts Committee to summon governors in those counties. And I've mentioned them. Isiolo, they have been allocated 102 million Kenya shillings. Lamu, 24 million Kenya shillings. Nyandarua, 121 million Kenya shillings. Tana River, 104 million Kenya shillings. Tharaka Nithi, 103 million shillings. In total, 454 million Kenya shillings for the construction of county headquarters. Madam Speaker, where this far that we have come, more than 10 years into devolution, it's actually a shame, let's just call it what it is. It's actually a shame that there are some county governments that have not yet constructed their headquarters. And that money continues to be allocated to them for the construction of county headquarters. Madam Speaker, it is my considered view that the conversation that we should be having in this Senate at this time is allocation of special funds for the construction of senators' offices in the counties. That's a fresher conversation that we could engage in and not talk about allocation of funds for the construction of county headquarters. The Senate County's Public Accounts Committee has a job to do. Senator Kajwang has a job to do. Madam Speaker, the last thing that I want to speak to in this bill is a general comment that, Madam Speaker, we as senators are sitting late. The Committee of Finance and Budget has taken a lot of time to work on this bill, to allocate funds and bring the allocations to this Senate for processing and debating and eventually passing for the money to go to the counties. Madam Speaker, the experience that I have is that when we do this, the governors and their governments are very happy. When we sit late in the night to pass these bills and allocate money to them, they are very, very happy. Madam Speaker, they should be equally happy when we go down there to oversight the expenditure of these funds. It should be okay when we give or we facilitate the release of funds to counties. It should be okay when we ask how these monies are being spent. Madam Speaker, in our oversight responsibility as senators, we shall not just look at processes. We shall also be interested in the scope of work for the money is allocated. We shall be interested in the quality of the work done, Madam Speaker, and most importantly, we shall be interested in value for money. Madam Speaker, I say this and conclude by saying that this now speaks to the dire need for this Senate again to push and ensure that senators are properly facilitated to undertake their oversight function. The work of the Senate, the work of any senator is incomplete if we are unable to carry out proper oversight. And we can only carry out proper oversight, Madam Speaker, if we have an oversight fund that, among other things, enables us as senators to procure the services of very qualified personnel in monitoring and evaluation in all spheres of project development to make sure that we are able to hold governors and their governments to account in the spending of the equitable share and the additional funds. Madam Speaker, with those remarks, I support.
Thank you, Senator. I now wish to call upon the mover to reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to take this opportunity to reply to various contributions that has been made by honorable senators to this additional allocation bill second reading motion. Madam Speaker, I want to first appreciate honorable members for contributing passionately to this bill, emphasizing the importance of this bill to county governments where we all represent. And a few issues that has come to light during the discussion that various honorable members have contributed are issues concerning whether it is appropriate to have equalization fund as part of this additional allocation bill. I stand to agree with all those that have contributed, as we've had the same discussion, interrogated, not only from the perspective of us giving us an opportunity to really justifiably contribute to equalization fund as required, but also from point of legality and avoiding hitches that may come up after this bill is processed together with additional allocation bill on 3 grounds. The most important ground is, as you are aware, additional allocation are conditional and unconditional revenues, of which are revenues of national government that is given to county government on certain conditions. However, equalization fund is not revenue of national government per se. If you look at the strict definition, CRA sets apart equalization fund before the revenues are shared vertically between national government and county government. Number 2, the modalities of utilization of unconditional grant or conditional unconditional grant or this additional allocation, which come with sets of conditions from the development partners as well as the government of Kenya, does not conform to the modalities of utilization of equalization fund, or it is flow as required. Number 3, which is extremely critical, we noticed during the interrogation and engagement with various stakeholders that the administrative cost of 3% that would have given effect to utilization of equalization fund has not been factored in this provision of equalization fund portion of the bill. And as such, Madam Speaker, we have engaged our legal experts as well as engaged the county government council of governors, and we've also engaged Commission of Revenue Allocation, and we've engaged the National Treasury, who have all concurred that it is not appropriately placed if bundled with an conditional grant, and as such, we will adopt that is proposed by honorable senators as they've contributed to this bill, as well as also various stakeholders as required. On the issue of medical equipment that has come up, we've also extensively, as a committee, engaged the Council of Governors, who are the end users of medical equipment in the hospitals. And being a former governor myself, there are some technical hitches, but there is greater good of utilization of these medical equipments in our county governments in terms of service provision. Notable among the issues that really touched me during my time in office as a governor is, CT scans, dialysis machines. People from my county used to travel 1,200 kilometers to Nairobi to do dialysis, and now they're able to enjoy the same services at the county level. Maybe given the natural growth of county government without the helping hand of the national government in terms of trying to really catalyze the process of quality health service improvement adaptation by county government, we would have taken it longer to get there. And as such, while I believe the agreement and contract between the providers of this leased equipment and the government is a little bit opaque, to the extent that up to when I left the office, we did not know explicitly the content of the agreement between the government of Kenya and the equipment service provider that we are engaging in. And there is need, and we have taken that issue up with National Treasury, with also Council of Governors, and they have requested that we process the provisions as provided, as 26 counties have already indicated their willingness to extend the contract, but on new terms that is clear to them. And as such, we have also looked, consulted the National Treasury, and the same has been shared. And I would like to, maybe when we are ready and we submit the report, the various justification in relation to that issue will also be shared in the report, Madam Speaker. The issue shared by my colleagues on construction of county headquarters, it is extremely sad. As a governor, and having served 10 full years, I stand here with the benefit of institutionalizing and operationalizing devolution, and having been part of this team. These counties have actually suffered disadvantage rather than advantage. The counties that opted to build their own county headquarters using their own resources without subjecting themselves to the mercy of the national government offer have managed to build their counties and are operating out of their counties, the county headquarters. But those that have, complained and they were listened to, it was a noble gesture then. However, the monies were not released in time, and as such, to date, those county governments do not have county headquarters to operate from. And we've said as a committee, it is imperative that we get to understand this issue a little bit better as Finance and Budget Committee, and we have discussed, and it will be submitted in the report, the need for the committee maybe to visit, to understand, because these allocations, to what extent has money been allocated, how much longer will the allocation continue becoming part of this additional allocation, and what are the contract terms of those, those county headquarters for the 5 counties that were supported by the national government. And unfortunately, 6 or 7 years down the line, those county headquarters do not, those counties do not have county headquarters, and they're still waiting for money to be appropriated in the budget at the mercy of National Treasury, and the National Treasury may or may not release the fund in time, and the counties may end up, by way of necessity, if 42 out of the 47 counties have their county headquarters, and the 5 that were made an offer to be supported, that offer has not practically worked out, then it is extremely critical that these counties consider other options of making sure they put their county headquarters in place. Madam Speaker, in as far as the issue of equalization fund criteria and the changes that took place, in terms of from the original intended 14 counties benefiting from equalization fund to 34 counties is a long story. And I was previously the chair of ASAL Committee of Council of Governors. And I was also the chair of bringing together 10 counties. And we have extensively engaged CRA on this issue. The CRA on this issue extensively. The definition that of government that was in place previously has taken in an attempt to try and dilute this equalization fund issue is extremely sad. It is extremely sad because marginalization is not equal to poverty, and poverty is not equal to marginalization. Marginalization is a state of poverty created by deliberate resource denial by successive government as a result of policy document that did not favor resource allocation to certain areas in this country using sessional paper number 10 of 1965. And the drafters of the Constitution envisaged a position where they use equalization fund to try and bring the development in this deliberately disadvantaged region in as much as possible at a level closer to the other counties or what the other counties enjoyed. But unfortunately, In later years, after a lot of bureaucracies of lack of implementation of equalization fund, the resultant impact is that they had to redefine what marginalization meant and equated marginalization to poverty and poverty to marginalization, and that so was the discussion about revenues in equalization fund to be given to marginalized areas, which in context, the whole concept of marginalization was very different to the drafters of the Constitution. And that disadvantage set forth where now marginalized areas and policy, marginalized areas, policy number 2 came into play, where then more than 2,000 plus areas, which when we engaged CRA then, CRA's response was, we are looking at pockets of marginalization within, perfect, maybe counties with food security and other issues that are basic. But they said we were looking for pockets of poverty within, and we want to address this because this money is meant for that. It was extremely unfortunate. We tried to drag it, and unfortunately, at some point, we've lost 10 years of the first 20 years sunset clause, and we agreed that for the sake of moving on and not being able to beat the system, that issue has taken root. It still remains clouded because while I acknowledge as a leader, that we have very serious problems of urban that need to be taken into consideration. And all the areas identified by CRA can be qualified as the urban poor that need certain affirmative action from the government of the day by way of another maybe 0.5% of the revenues collected nationally to be given to address the issues affecting the urban poor, while safeguarding the original intent of the drafters of the Constitution, which is equalization fund to be used for the previously marginalized counties, which resulted from deliberate policy document of government. And this is deliberate resource denial by successive government before the advent of devolution. And as such, is an issue maybe when we separate the bill and we have an equalization fund bill, we'll be able to interrogate and get to see to what extent we'll be able to define. I feel, as my colleagues, the senators who have contributed, feel that we really need to look at the concept of sunset clause, because Article 204 creates a provision that can be exploited by Parliament to be able to make sure we give justice where it deserves in terms of extending the sunset clause, because 12 years has already been lost as it is. And then county governments, those that may not have included, to do that through their budget in order to make sure that the oversight responsibilities as required by law follows the same trajectory as required. But this also is part of the many additional responsibilities that senators will have to undertake in order to make sure that